There's a mathematical certainty in history that nobody wants to acknowledge. Patterns so consistent, so predictable, that it's destroyed every dominant power for the last 500 years. And right now, in 2025, the United States isn't approaching this pattern. We're already deep inside it. Stage 5 of 7. It's in the final 2 stages. They don't take centuries. They take years, sometimes months. In 1580, the Spanish Empire controlled more gold and silver than any power in human history. Their currency, the Spanish real, was accepted from Manila to Madrid to Mexico City. Within 70 years, they declared bankruptcy 9 times. The empire collapsed. The currency became worthless. It never recovered. In 1920, the British Empire ruled a quarter of the planet. The pound sterling was the undisputed global reserve currency. Every central bank, every merchant, every government held pounds. Within 30 years, the empire was gone. The currency had lost 60% of its value. Britain became America's dependent ally, not its equal. In 1985, the Soviet Union was the other superpower. Nuclear arsenal, global military reach, control over a dozen nations. 6 years later, December 26, 1991, it ceased to exist. No war, no invasion, pure economic implosion. The ruble became worthless overnight. Superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons collapsed because the money died. 3 times. 3 global powers. 3 identical sequences. And every single time, the people living through it believed they were different, believed the rules didn't apply to them, believed their power was permanent. They were wrong every time. We were about to learn the same lesson because the United States has already completed 5 of the 7 stages. We're not debating whether this happens. We're debating how fast. Let me show you the 7-stage pattern, how it destroyed Spain, Britain, and the USSR, and why the math says we're next. Because once you see the sequence, you'll understand that 36 trillion in debt isn't a problem we're trying to solve. It's stage 3 of a collapse already underway. 7 stages, the pattern that never fails. Before we trace how this pattern destroyed 3 empires, you need to understand what we're looking at. This isn't political theory. This isn't economic philosophy. This is observable, repeatable, historical fact. When a dominant power follows this 7-stage sequence, collapse is inevitable. It's not possible. Inevitable. Stage 1. Military overextension. The empire expands beyond its economic capacity to maintain control. Bases everywhere. Commitments to everyone. Wars on multiple fronts. Defense spending that devours the budget while the economy beneath it weakens. Stage 2. Currency debasement. The government can't fund its commitments through taxation alone, so it debases the currency. Spain mixed copper into silver. Britain printed pounds beyond gold backing. The USSR printed rubles nobody wanted. America will get there. Stage 3. Debt spiral. Borrowing accelerates to pay for military commitments and currency debasement. The government borrows to pay interest on previous borrowing. Deficits become permanent. The debt-to-GDP ratio crosses 100%, then keeps climbing. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. The economy stops producing real goods. Manufacturing moves abroad. The nation becomes dependent on imports, wealth flows out to pay for goods the empire used to make itself. The trade deficit becomes structural. Stage 5. Social decay. Trust in institutions collapses. Crime rises. The best talent leaves or checks out. Fertility drops. Political dysfunction becomes total. The society that built the empire fragments into competing factions that can't agree on anything. Stage 6. Loss of reserve currency status. This is the critical stage. Allies start diversifying. Trade moves to other currencies. Foreign central banks sell your bonds. And suddenly, all that currency you printed to fund stages 1 through 5 comes flooding back home. Inflation explodes. Imports become unaffordable. The standard of living collapses. Stage 7. Systemic collapse. The military can't be funded. The government can't function. The currency becomes worthless. Allies abandon you. Tories break away. And the superpower that everyone thought was permanent ceases to exist as a dominant force. Not over centuries, over years, sometimes months. That's the pattern. 7 stages. Sequential, Irreversible. Once you've completed the first 5, and here's what should terrify you. Spain completed all 7 stages in 90 years. Britain took 40 years. The Soviet Union took 6 years from stage 5 to complete collapse. We've completed 5 stages in 54 years since Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. We're not moving slowly, we're accelerating. And stages 6 and 7 don't take decades. It happened fast. Catastrophically fast. Let me show you exactly how it played out 3 times before. Because when you see the pattern, when you understand the mechanism, you'll realize that what's happening to America right now isn't unique. It's not unprecedented. It's not even surprising. It's the same sequence, the same decisions, the same trajectory, and the same ending. Spain. The original blueprint, 1550 to 1640, after Columbus reached the Americas in 1492, Spain hit the imperial jackpot. They conquered the Aztec Empire in 1521, the Inca Empire in 1533, seized control of the richest gold and silver deposits ever discovered. The mines at Potosi in Bolivia, Zacatecas in Mexico, these weren't just mines. They were the money supply of the entire world. By 1550, Spanish galleons were transporting 200 tons of silver per year across the Atlantic. By 1600, over 400 tons annually. Spain didn't just have wealth. They controlled wealth itself. The Spanish real became the global reserve currency. Every major merchant, every government, every trader needed Spanish silver to conduct business. Sound familiar? King Philip II, ruling from 1556 to 1598, inherited an empire that produced more precious metals than the rest of the world combined. He had unlimited money, and he spent it on unlimited ambition. Stage 1. Military overextension. Philip II fought wars everywhere simultaneously. War against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, war against France over Italy, war against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands that lasted 80 years, war against England, culminating in the Spanish Armada disaster in 1588, wars in the Philippines, wars in the Americas. By 1580, Spain had military commitments on 4 continents. The cost was staggering. By the 1590s, military spending consumed 75% of Spain's revenue, not 75% of the budget. 75% of all money coming into the Spanish crown. Everything else, administration, infrastructure, domestic needs, fought over the remaining 25%. And still, it wasn't enough. Stage 2. Currency debasement. Here's where the pattern begins to bite. Spain had all the silver in the world, but they were still spending faster than the mines could produce. So they did what every failing empire does. They debased the currency. In 1566, Spain started minting vellon coins, mixing copper with silver. At first, the debasement was minor. Coin that was supposed to be 90% silver became 80% silver. But once you start, you can't stop. By 1600, vellon coins were 95% copper, 5% silver. By 1620, pure copper with silver coating that rubbed off. The government insisted these coins had the same value as pure silver. Markets disagreed. Inflation exploded. Prices tripled between 1550 and 1600, then tripled again by 1640. A currency backed by the world's silver was becoming worthless because the government kept mixing in copper and insisting the coins were worth the same. The Spanish real, the global reserve currency, was dying from debasement. Stage 3. Debt spiral. Spain borrowed constantly, from Italian bankers, German bankers, Dutch merchants, anyone with gold. Philip II defaulted constantly. Spain declared bankruptcy in 1557, just 1 year into his reign, then again in 1560, again in 1575, again in 1596. 4 bankruptcies in 40 years. Each time, the pattern was identical. Spain couldn't make debt payments. Creditors panicked. The government restructured the debt at lower interest rates, promised reforms, and immediately borrowed more to keep fighting wars. The debt was never reduced. It was just rolled over, restructured, and expanded. By 1598, when Philip II died, Spain owed more than 14 years of total revenue, not budget. Revenue. Everything the crown collected in taxes for 14 years wouldn't cover the debt. His successors kept borrowing. More bankruptcies in 1607, 1627, 1647, 1653. Spain defaulted 9 times in 100 years, and each time they borrowed more. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. Here's the mechanism that destroyed Spain, and it's the most important part of the pattern. When you have unlimited money flowing in from external sources, you stop producing anything yourself. Spanish nobility considered manual labor beneath them. Manufacturing was for commoners. Agriculture was for peasants. Build ships when you could buy them from the Dutch. Why grow wheat when you could import it from the Baltic? Why make cloth when Italian silk was available? Spain had silver. Silver bought everything. So productive capacity collapsed. Spanish shipyards closed. Dutch and English builders took over. Spanish farms stagnated. Wheat came from Poland and Russia. Spanish workshops disappeared. Manufactured goods came from France, England, the Netherlands. All the silver coming from the Americas flowed straight back out to pay for imports. Spain became a conduit. Wealth passed through, but none of it stayed. The regions that supplied Spain, the Netherlands, England, France, they built industries. They developed expertise. They became efficient. And when Spain's silver production declined, when the mines at Potosi started depleting in the 1620s, Spain had nothing. No industries to tax, no exports to sell, no productive capacity to fall back on. Stage 5, social decay. By 1600, Spanish society was fracturing. Nobility lived in luxury, exempt from taxes, contributing nothing. The merchant class, the productive class, was emigrating. They moved to Amsterdam, to London, to places where industry was valued. What remained was a society of rent-seekers, bureaucrats, soldiers, and priests. Nobody creating wealth. Everyone consuming it. Crime exploded in Madrid and Seville. Beggars filled the streets. The government couldn't maintain order because they couldn't pay administrators or police. The best minds left. The economy hollowed out. And the silver, the thing that had made Spain rich, became a curse. Because it allowed them to avoid building a real economy. Stage 6. Loss of reserve currency status. 1640, Spanish silver coins weren't accepted at face value anywhere outside Spanish territory. Merchants tested every coin, weighed it, melted it down to determine actual silver content. The Spanish real, once the global standard, became just another debased currency. Trade moved to Dutch guilders and English pounds. Spain's financial dominance was over. Stage 7. Collapse. The collapse was political and military, but the cause was economic. In 1640, Portugal rebelled and broke away. Spain couldn't stop them because they couldn't fund the army. In 1648, the Netherlands won independence after 80 years of war. Spain couldn't continue fighting because they were broke. By 1659, Spain signed humiliating treaties with France, giving up territory and influence. The Spanish Empire still existed on maps. They still controlled colonies in the Americas. But they were a second-rate power. The silver mines kept producing, but the wealth went to paying old debts and buying foreign goods. Spain never recovered. Today they're a pleasant European country, relevant on the world stage. A cautionary tale of what happens when unlimited money meets unlimited ambition and zero productive capacity. 90 years. At S. How long it took from Philip II's succession in 1556 to effective collapse by 1640. The pattern played out completely. Military overextension, currency debasement, debt spiral, loss of production, social decay, currency rejection, collapse. In every stage, Spanish leaders believed they were exceptional. They had the silver, they had the empire. They were Spain. The rules didn't apply. They were wrong. Britain. When the sun set, 1914 to 1951, let's jump forward 300 years. By 1900, the British Empire was the largest empire in human history. They controlled India, Australia, Canada, huge swaths of Africa, the Middle East, Caribbean islands, Pacific territories, 412 million subjects, 1/4 of Earth's land surface, and critically, the pound sterling was the undisputed global reserve currency. Every central bank held pounds. Every major trade contract was denominated in pounds. British government bonds were considered the safest investment on the planet. London was the financial center of the world. The city of London, the square mile, controlled more capital than anywhere else. Britain wasn't just powerful, they were the system. And just like Spain 300 years earlier, they believed it was permanent. They were wrong. Stage 1. Military overextension. The British Empire had military commitments everywhere, defending India from Russia, protecting trade routes through the Mediterranean and Suez, maintaining control over African colonies, managing tensions in the Middle East, competing with Germany in the naval arms race, defending Canada from American expansion. They had to protect territory on 6 continents. The cost was enormous. By 1910, Britain was spending 3.5% of GDP on the military in peacetime. That's $70 billion in today's terms for an economy the size of the UK. Sustainable, but straining. Then World War I started in 1914, and Britain faced a choice. Stay neutral, let Europe destroy itself, maintain the empire, or jump in, fight Germany, bankrupt the treasury, and hope to rebuild afterward. They chose to fight. World War I cost Britain £9.5 billion. That's over $1 trillion in today's money, or more than 3 times Britain's entire pre-war GDP. They borrowed from everyone, especially the United States. By 1918, Britain owed America $4.7 billion, about $200 billion today. The creditor became the debtor. The empire survived, but the foundation cracked. Stage 2, currency debasement. The pound sterling was backed by gold. Pound 4.25 per ounce, fixed since the early 1800s, but the war drained gold reserves. Britain shipped gold to America to pay for weapons, food, ammunition, supplies. By 1920, gold reserves were less than half of 1914 levels. Britain suspended the gold standard during the war, allowing them to print pounds beyond gold backing. When the war ended, they tried to go back on gold at the pre-war rate in 1925. Winston Churchill, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, insisted on this. The pound must return to its former glory. The problem was economic reality. Pound was overvalued. British exports became too expensive. Coal, steel, textiles, manufactured goods, all priced out of international markets. Unemployment rose. Factories closed. The economy stagnated. The government had to keep interest rates high to maintain the pound's value, which destroyed domestic growth. By 1931, Britain couldn't hold it anymore. On September 21, 1931, Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound was devalued 25% overnight. The global reserve currency, backed by the largest empire on earth, had just admitted it couldn't keep its promises. Other countries followed Britain off gold. The international monetary system collapsed. Stage 3, debt spiral. Britain never recovered from World War I debt before World War II started in 1939. They spent the 1920s trying to rebuild. The 1930s hit them with the Great Depression, and then they had to fight Germany again. World War II cost Britain another £28 billion, about $1.4 trillion today. By 1945, Britain's debt was 250% of GDP. They owed the United States and Canada over £3 billion under the Lend-Lease program. They were completely dependent on American loans to function. In 1946, Britain negotiated a loan from America. $3.75 billion at 2% interest. The terms required Britain to make the pound convertible and support free trade. Britain accepted because they had no choice. They were broke. The empire was unsustainable. The war was won, but Britain was finished as an independent power. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. Britain's manufacturing dominance eroded throughout the early 1900s. In 1870, Britain produced 32% of global manufacturing output. By 1913, 14%. By 1950, 9%. The factories that powered the Industrial Revolution, the shipyards that built the Royal Navy, the mills that supplied the empire, were losing to American and German competition. Britain was still exporting, but imports were growing faster. The trade deficit became structural. Critically, the empire that once generated wealth was now consuming resources. India wasn't profitable anymore. African colonies cost more to administer than they generated. The empire was a liability, not an asset. Stage 5. Social decay. Post-war Britain was exhausted. Rationing continued until 1954. 9 years after the war ended. The best and brightest emigrated to America, Canada, Australia. Brain drain accelerated. Industries that survived the war faced strikes and labor unrest. The social compact that held Britain together was fraying. Stage 6. Loss of reserve currency status. This is where Britain's collapse accelerated. In 1947, Britain was forced to make the pound convertible as part of the American loan agreement. Within weeks, £1 billion flowed out of Britain. Everyone wanted dollars, not pounds. The convertibility was suspended after 6 weeks, but the damage was done. The world had voted. The pound wasn't a reserve currency anymore. The dollar was. By 1950, central banks were selling pounds and buying dollars. Trade shifted to dollar contracts. The pound kept falling. In 1940, 1 pound equaled $4.03. By 1950, $2.80. By 1967, $2.40. By 1976, $1.70. Today, about $1.27. And 68% decline from peak to present. The global reserve currency became a regional currency. Stage 7. Collapse. Britain's empire disappeared in 25 years. India gained independence in 1947, taking 400 million subjects with it. Burma, Ceylon, Palestine gone by 1948. African colonies throughout the 1950s and 60s, the Caribbean, Pacific Islands, Middle East protectorates, all gone by 1970. The empire that ruled a quarter of the planet was reduced to the British Isles and a few scattered territories. Britain joined the European Economic Community in 1973, not as a leader, but as a desperate applicant needing access to markets. The sun had set on the British Empire. It never rose again. 40 years. From 1914 to 1951, Britain went from dominant superpower to American dependency. The military overextended in 2 world wars. The currency was debased off the gold standard. Debt spiraled to 250% of GDP. Productive capacity eroded. Society fractured. The pound lost reserve status, and the empire collapsed. The same pattern, same sequence. The USSR, the fastest collapse in history, 1985 to 1991. Now, let's look at the most recent example. The one that proves stages 6 and 7 happened fast. The Soviet Union in the 1980s was the other superpower. Nuclear arsenal equal to America's, military reach across the globe. Control over Eastern Europe, influence in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and an ideology that claimed to be the future of humanity. They were wrong. The pattern destroyed them in 6 years. Stage 1. Military overextension. The Soviet Union spent 15 to 20% of GDP on the military throughout. The Cold War, that's triple what America spent. They had to match the US in nuclear weapons, tanks, aircraft, submarines, troops. They had to counter NATO in Europe, American allies in Asia, and Project Power globally. Plus, they were fighting in Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989, supporting Cuba, which cost $5 billion per year, propping up Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola. It's everywhere America had influence, they had to counter. And their economy was a fraction of America's size. We're maintaining superpower commitments on a third world budget. Stage 2. Currency debasement. The ruble was never a real currency. It couldn't be freely exchanged. Soviet citizens hoarded dollars when they could get them. The government had to buy foreign goods with gold, oil, and weapons because nobody wanted rubles. By the 1980s, the Soviet government was printing rubles to cover domestic spending while their actual hard currency reserves depleted. The ruble was becoming worthless even inside the Soviet Union. Stage 3. Debt spiral. The USSR borrowed heavily from Western banks in the 1970s when oil prices were high. By 1985, they owed over $30 billion to Western creditors. When oil prices collapsed from $35 per barrel in 1982, $10 per barrel by 1986, Soviet revenue disappeared. They couldn't service the debt. They couldn't import grain. They couldn't buy technology. They were broke. Loss of productive capacity. The Soviet economy stopped producing anything the world wanted except oil and weapons. Consumer goods were garbage. Technology was decades behind. Agriculture failed so badly They had to import grain from America, the country they were competing against. By 1985, economic growth was zero. The economy was dead. It just didn't know it yet. Stage 5. Social decay. Soviet society was collapsing from within. Alcoholism was epidemic. Life expectancy was dropping. Corruption was universal. Nobody believed in communism anymore. The best scientists and engineers wanted to leave. The system that promised utopia had delivered misery, and everyone knew it. Stage 6. Loss of reserve currency status. This doesn't apply to the USSR the same way because the ruble was never a reserve currency. But the mechanism is the same. When your currency becomes worthless, when nobody wants it, you can't import anything. By 1989, Soviet hard currency reserves were depleted. They couldn't buy foreign goods. Shortages became severe. Stage 7. Collapse. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Eastern Europe left. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany, gone in months. The Soviet government couldn't stop them because they were broke. They couldn't afford to intervene. The Red Army, the force that terrified NATO for 40 years, couldn't be deployed because they couldn't be paid. On December 25, 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned. The next day, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. The hammer and sickle flag came down from the Kremlin. The ruble collapsed. Hyperinflation hit 2,500% in 1992. A superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons, a military of 4 million troops, and control over 15 republics disappeared. 6 years from stage 5 to complete collapse, not gradual decline. Total systemic failure. No war, no invasion. Pure economic implosion. And everyone was surprised except people who understood the pattern. America. Stage 5 of 7, 1971 to 2025. Now let's talk about what should terrify you. The United States is following the exact same pattern. We're not approaching it. We're not on the edge of it. We're deep inside it. Stage 5. And stages 6 and 7 are coming faster than anyone wants to admit. Stage 1. Military overextension. The United States has over 750 military bases in 80 countries. We have troops in 150 countries. We're committed to defending Europe through NATO. 30 countries. Defending Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia. We're fighting proxy wars against Russia and Ukraine, positioning against China over Taiwan, maintaining operations in the Middle East, Africa, everywhere. Our military budget is $886 billion in 2024. That's more than the next 10 countries combined. China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, the UK, Germany, France, South Korea, Japan. And Ukraine combined spend less than we do, and we're still stretched thin. If China invades Taiwan, if Russia pushes into Poland, if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, we cannot respond to all of it simultaneously. We have commitments we cannot fulfill. We're overextended exactly like Spain in 1580, Britain in 1914, and the USSR in 1985. Stage 2. Currency debasement. In 1971, Richard Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar was no longer convertible to gold. It became pure fiat currency, backed by nothing except the government's promise. Since then, we've been running the printing press. The M2 money supply in 2000 was $4.6 trillion. Today, it's over $21 trillion. It's a 356% increase in 25 years. During COVID, we printed $6 trillion in 2 years. It's $1 trillion created out of nothing to fund stimulus, unemployment, PPP loans, everything. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. What cost $1 in 1971 costs $7.59 today. We're not mixing copper into silver coins. We're just printing unlimited paper. The mechanism is different. The effect is identical. Currency debasement. Stage 3. Debt spiral. The United States currently owes $36.2 trillion. That's 122% of GDP. In 2000, the debt was $5.6 trillion, or 55% of GDP. We've increased debt by $30.6 trillion in 25 years, and it's accelerating. We're now paying over $1 trillion per year just in interest. Not principal, interest. That's more than we spend on defense, more than we spend on Medicare. We're borrowing money to pay interest on money we already borrowed. That's the definition of a debt spiral. The Congressional Budget Office projects will hit $50 trillion by 2033, $60 trillion by 2035, and those projections assume no recessions, no wars, no crises. Every crisis means more borrowing. Every recession means bigger deficits. Debt only goes one direction: up. We're following the exact path Spain took with 9 bankruptcies. Britain took 250% debt to GDP, and the USSR took to complete fiscal collapse. Stage 4, loss of productive capacity. America doesn't make things anymore, we design them, we finance them, we consume them, but we don't produce them. Our manufacturing base has been gutted, shipped to China, Mexico, Vietnam, anywhere labor is cheaper. In 1970, manufacturing was 25% of US GDP. Today, it's 11%. We've lost 5 million manufacturing jobs since 2000, and we're dependent on foreign supply chains for everything. Pharmaceuticals, 80% made in China and India. Electronics, 90% made in Asia. Steel, we import more than we produce. Even military equipment has foreign components. Our trade deficit is $800 billion per year. We import $800 billion more than we export annually. That's wealth flowing out, just like Spain's silver flowed out too by foreign goods. We're consuming more than we produce, buying from others what we use to make ourselves. And just like Spain, we're able to do this because we have the reserve currency. The dollar buys everything. But what happens when that changes? What happens when the dollar loses reserve status and we still can't produce anything? We'll find out in stages 6 and 7. Stage 5, social decay. American society is fragmenting. Trust in institutions is at all-time lows. Congress has a 20% approval rating. Trust in media, below 40%. Trust in the Supreme Court, dropping. Nobody trusts anything anymore. Crime is rising in major cities. Homelessness is exploding. San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, Philadelphia, visible collapse. Drug overdoses kill 110,000 Americans annually. That's one Vietnam War every year from fentanyl alone. The best and brightest are leaving. Tech workers moving to Portugal, Dubai, Singapore. Billionaires renouncing citizenship. The birth rate is 1.67 children per woman, well below replacement. The population is aging. The young people who remain are demoralized, drowning in student debt, unable to afford homes. Political dysfunction is total. We can't pass budgets. We can't fix infrastructure, can't agree on anything. The country that built the interstate highway system landed on the moon. And won the Cold War now takes 10 years to repair a bridge. We're at stage 5. Exactly where the Soviet Union was in 1985. Exactly where Britain was in 1945. The military is overextended. The currency is debased. The debt is spiraling. Production is gone. Society is decaying. We've completed 5 stages. To remain. Stage 6. Loss of reserve currency status. This is the critical stage, and we're seeing the early signs right now. In 2000, the dollar was 71% of global reserve holdings. Today it's 58%. It's a 13-point drop. But more importantly, the trend is accelerating. Central banks are diversifying. China and Russia trade in yuan and rubles. India buys Russian oil in rupees. Saudi Arabia accepts yuan for oil sales to China. It's the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are developing alternative payment systems. They're talking about a BRICS currency. They're buying gold. Central bank gold purchases hit record highs in 2022 and 2023. They re-preparing for a world where the dollar is dominant. And here's the mechanism that will trigger stage 6. The US has printed trillions of dollars. Most of those dollars are held abroad because the dollar is the reserve currency. Foreign governments, foreign banks, foreign companies hold dollars to conduct trade. But when the dollar loses reserve status, when trade moves to other currencies, all those dollars come home. Trillions of dollars flooding back into the United States. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. That's inflation. Not 3% inflation. It's not 10% inflation. Hyperinflation. We've been exporting inflation for 50 years by printing dollars that other countries hold. When they send those dollars back, we'll experience all that inflation at once, overnight, and we'll have no way to stop it because we couldn't unproduce the money we've already created. This is what happened to Britain in 1947 when the pound was made convertible. Money flooded out. The currency collapsed. Britain was forced to abandon convertibility and accept that they weren't the reserve currency anymore. This is what happened to the USSR when the ruble became worthless. Hyperinflation hit 2,500% in 1 year. Savings were wiped out. Imports stopped. The economy collapsed. We're not there yet, but we're close. And when it starts, it happens fast. Stage 7. Systemic collapse. This is the end game. When the reserve currency fails, when the debt becomes impossible, when the military can't be funded, the superpower dies. Not slowly, quickly, catastrophically. Spain took 20 years from losing reserve status to effective collapse. Britain took 5 years from losing reserve status to losing the empire. The Soviet Union took 2 years from economic crisis to non-existence. When stage 7 hits, here's what happens. The military can't be funded. We have 750 bases in 80 countries. Troops in 150 countries. $886 billion budget. But if the dollar collapses, if hyperinflation hits, that budget becomes worthless. We can't pay troops. We can't maintain equipment. We can't project power. The base is close. The troops come home. The empire contracts. Allies abandon us. If we can't defend them, they'll seek protection elsewhere. Japan, South Korea, they'll cut deals with China. Eastern Europe will accommodate Russia. The Middle East will realign. NATO will fracture. The alliance system that projects American power will dissolve. The domestic economy collapses. If we can't import and we can't produce, shortages become severe. Food, medicine, energy, everything. The standard of living drops 50%, 60%, maybe more. The middle class that defines America disappears. Political crisis follows economic crisis. States will consider secession. California has the 5th largest economy in the world. Texas is energy independent. Why stay in a union that's collapsing? The federal government, unable to fund itself, unable to maintain order, will fracture. This isn't speculation. This is what happened to the Soviet Union. 15 republics became 15 countries. The military couldn't be paid. The government couldn't function. The ruble became worthless. And the superpowers ceased to exist in 900 days. The math says we're next. Why this time isn't different? Every empire believes they're exceptional. Spain believed they had a divine right to empire. Britain believed they were bringing civilization to the world. The USSR believed they were the inevitable future of mankind. All wrong. America believes we're different too. We have technology, we have the dollar, we have the strongest military. We're America. The rules don't apply. But the pattern doesn't care about exceptionalism. The pattern is mathematical. You cannot maintain military commitments beyond your economic capacity forever. You cannot debase your currency without consequences. You cannot borrow indefinitely. You cannot hollow out production and survive. You cannot allow social decay and remain strong. You cannot lose reserve currency status and stay a superpower. The sequence is locked in. We've completed 5 of 7 stages. And stages 6 and 7 don't take centuries. They take years, maybe less. Here's the timeline that should terrify you. Since 2020, we've accelerated every stage. Printed more money in 2 years than the previous 50, increased debt by $10 trillion in 4 years, expanded military commitments, watched manufacturing leave, allowed cities to decay, and done nothing to stop it. We're not walking the path anymore, we're sprinting down it. And the acceleration means the end comes faster than the historical average. Spain took 90 years, Britain took 40 years. The USSR took 6 years from stage 5. How long for America? Maybe 10 years, maybe 5? Maybe we're already in stage 6 and just don't realize it yet. The BRICS summit in 2024 discussed alternatives to the dollar. Saudi Arabia is accepting yuan. China and Russia are settled trade in their own currencies. Central banks are selling treasuries and buying gold. The early signs of stage 6 are visible right now. And once it starts, once reserve currency status begins to slip, the acceleration is brutal. Here's what you need to understand. The pattern says collapse is coming. The math says collapse is inevitable. And the timeline says it's coming soon. Not in 50 years. Not in 30 years. This decade, maybe this presidential term, the United States will not go from superpower to irrelevance gradually. It will happen suddenly, shockingly, in a way that seems impossible right before it happens. Just like Spain in the 1640s, just like Britain in 1947, just like the USSR in 1991. Everyone will be surprised except the people who understood the pattern, people who saw that we were at stage 5 and knew what comes next. The people who studied history and realized that America isn't exceptional. We're just the latest empire following the same path. 3 times the pattern played out. Spain, Britain, the USSR, all followed the 7 stages. All collapsed. All believed they were different. All were wrong. The United States is at stage 5. Stages 6 and 7 are coming. And when they arrive, when the dollar loses reserve status, when the debt becomes impossible, when the military can't be funded, everyone will ask how this happened. How did we not see it? How did the greatest superpower in history collapse so quickly? And the answer will be simple. You followed the pattern. It's the same pattern that destroyed 3 empires before you. The 7-stage pattern that never fails. You completed 5 stages, and the final 2 stages are inevitable once you've gone that far. The pattern says we're next. The math confirms it. And history, which has watched empires die the same way over and over, says we're about to learn the lesson the hard way. If this opened your eyes to where we actually are in the sequence, you need to understand what's coming. Because stages 6 and 7 don't announce themselves. They just happen fast, catastrophically. And by the time everyone realizes what's happening, it's already too late to stop. The 7-stage dollar decline destroyed Spain, Britain, and the USSR. The United States is at stage 5, and the pattern says we're next. If this helped you see where we really are in the sequence, subscribe to my channel. When stages 6 and 7 arrive, you'll want to know what happened and why. The answers aren't waiting ahead of us. They're already written in the past, and I'll show you where to find them.